Welcome back all of you. Welcome to Learn Medicine by Dr. Nikita. In today's lecture, we'll be discussing about the treatment options available for bronchial asthma. So, in previous 2-3 lectures, we've already discussed about the pathophysiology of bronchial asthma, the probable treatment options. Now we know about the brief mechanism of action of these drug choices and what are the tentative methods where we can combat with the condition of asthma midway, right? So let's start with the first one. These are the names which are listed here. I'll just speak the full names for you. First is prevention of antigen antibody reaction, right? This is neutralization of immunoglobulin E. This is inhibition of inflammation of bronchial hyperreactivity. This is inhibition of release of mediators, inhibition of constrictor neurotransmitter, mimicking the dilator neurotransmitter, antagonism of related mediators, and directly acting bronchodilators. Right? So let's start with each of them. So here is the first one, prevention of antigen antibody reaction. Right? How can we deal with that? This stands for antigen antibody reaction. So basically inhibition of antigen antibody reaction, or somehow we have to stop the antigen and antibody reaction to happen, which will in totality suppress the antigen antibody reaction results. So when the antigen and antibody reacts, what happens? The chain of cellular events is triggered. In case of allergic asthma, in case of bronchial asthma, then if the allergen has already entered, or if the antigen or the allergen has already entered the body, then it will combine with the antibody which is the defense of the body. They together will initiate a kind of reaction which will trigger the release of mucus, inflammation, and obviously hypersensitivity, and all the cellular events will be triggered. All the cellular events will be triggered. That will, this initial reaction will start attracting the release of all the mediators, which will further intensify the release of mucus, inflammation, swelling, which leads to a lot of cell components and in that smooth muscle area, thereby blocking the passage. So what can we do in the first space? I am removing this here. The first reaction of the body could be, the first defense we can go for is preventing this antigen antibody reaction. How can we do that? First of all, identification of the antigen. How about we identify the antigen or the allergen? If we identify the allergen, what you are allergic to, you can easily avoid that allergen. Maybe supposingly you are allergic to pollens, right? So whenever you go out on roads or maybe out in the open space, you are covering your mouth. That could be one thing. So somehow you are avoiding the allergen. So one thing is avoiding the allergen. Second is kind of improving your immunity in different ways, maybe through different types of medication, through immunity boosting foods. That is how you are now hyposensitive. So I am saying that we are promoting hyposensitization, right? So one is identification of the allergen, other is hyposensitization. So you are not much sensitive to that allergen now. So there are different medications for that. You are avoiding the allergen in the first place. Second, your body is now hyposensitive, not hypersensitive. So these are the two ways in which you can avoid or inhibit the antigen antibody reaction. So this is the first treatment option which will stop the release of cellular events, and the bronchial asthma will not be triggered, or that condition of bronchoconstriction will not happen. So this is the first one. I will say inhibit the entry of allergen. I'll summarize it like this. And second is hyposensitization. Next is already written here. This will lead to inhibition of antigen antibody reaction, that is inhibition of the reaction of antigen and antibody. So there will be no release of mucus, there will be no cellular events which will trigger the chain reaction to cause bronchial asthma, hence no plugging and no airway obstruction. Clear to everyone? Right? So let's now move to the next one, that is neutralization of IgE. So first of all, IgE stands for immunoglobulin E. Immunoglobulin E, right? So neutralization of IgE is the second method through which we can defend the body for triggering the condition of bronchial asthma. And how? So whenever the allergen enters the body, so this allergen is stimulating the release of allergen specific immunoglobulin E. So as soon as the allergen enters the body, so through whatever routes, that allergen specific immunoglobulin E is released by the body, and this allergen specific immunoglobulin E, it binds with its receptor molecule. It binds with its cognate receptor, and this in turn triggers a series of events, right? This in turn triggers the release of basically inflammation and increase all the cellular components, the inflammation inside the smooth muscles, and ultimately leads to bronchoconstriction, right? So what drug is preferred here to deal with this kind of a condition? Here, omalizumab. This drug is responsible for suppression of release of the allergen specific immunoglobulin E. So even if you are exposed to the allergen, your body is allergic to, your body on consuming omalizumab will not produce the allergen specific immunoglobulin. Therefore, there will be no binding to the receptor, and all these events will be inhibited. Understood the second one? So how is this working? I'll just remove all of this and summarize it here. So omalizumab is responsible for inhibition of release of IgE, therefore inhibition of mucus release, therefore inhibition of inflammation. Got it? Now let's proceed to the third one. Inhibition of inflammation of bronchial hyperreactivity. Inhibition of inflammation of bronchial hyperreactivity. So here you are inhibiting the inflammation condition and the bronchial condition. So this is what drug deals with this? Corticosteroids. Corticosteroids are the drug of choice here. And as you can directly see the name of the condition, so corticosteroids directly hit on inhibition of inflammation. They inhibit inflammation, they inhibit the hyperreactivity condition, they inhibit the airway obstruction. So when there will be no inflammation, there will be no or decreased release of mucus, obviously the airway obstruction will not happen, hyperreactivity will be suppressed. So corticosteroids is the choice of drug here. So I am moving on to the next one, inhibition of release of mediators. So in the inhibition of release of mediators, the drug of choice is mast cell stabilizers, right? So mast cell stabilizers are responsible for, as you can see it from the name, inhibition of release of mast cells. And in previous lectures we have learned how much the mast cells were responsible for triggering all of these conditions, right? So when the mast cells release will not be there, even if the allergen has entered your body, the body will not be releasing mast cells due to the consumption of mast cell stabilizers, and it will not trigger the condition of bronchial asthma, right? So in order to just get thorough with the pathophysiology, if you are still confused about these points, how are these things inhibiting or promoting, you can directly go to my previous two lectures, and there you will learn more about the pathophysiology of all and the role of all these mediators which ultimately led to triggering of the inflammation reaction, right?